The entire restaurant held its breath. Not because of the broken glass, but because the girl who never spoke was standing, staring, reaching toward someone shouldn't have known. Chairman Jang Min-suk didn't flinch. He sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled beneath his chin, watching his daughter with the same calculating patience he used to break rival syndicates. So-yeon stood beside her chair, her small hand still extended from where she'd swept the water glass to the floor. Her dark eyes were fixed on something, or someone, across the room. The girl was 6 years old and had never spoken a single word. Around the table, 5 of Seoul's most dangerous men waited. They'd flown in from Busan, from Incheon, from territories Jang controlled like a silent emperor. They'd come to discuss territory disputes, protection rackets, and the delicate matter of a prosecutor who'd become too curious. But the meeting had stalled the moment So-yeon had entered the room, led by her nanny, and refused to leave her father's side. Now the child stood there, staring, while her father's empire held its breath. Jang followed his daughter's gaze to the waitress kneeling to collect the broken glass. She was black, tall, with careful hands and a presence that seemed determined to occupy as little space as possible. Her name tag read Rebecca. She worked with the efficiency of someone who understood that in places like this, invisibility was survival. So-yeon, Jang said softly, the only gentle voice any of these men would ever hear from him. Sit down. The girl didn't move. Rebecca glanced up, met the child's eyes for a fraction of a second, then quickly returned to her task. She gathered the larger pieces first, wrapping them in a cloth napkin with practiced care. She hummed something under her breath, a melody so quiet it barely registered. So-yeon took a step toward her. The bodyguard nearest to the child moved, but Jang raised one finger. The man froze. They all watched as So-yeon approached the kneeling waitress, moved around her, and simply stood there. Watching. Close enough to touch. Rebecca's hand stilled. She looked up again, this time unable to avoid the child's intense scrutiny. For a long moment, something passed between them, something none of the armed men in that room could identify or understand. Then So-yeon reached out and touched a strand of Rebecca's hair that had escaped from beneath her service cap. She wound it around her small finger, testing its texture with the curiosity of someone discovering something familiar yet impossible. Rebecca's breath caught. Her eyes widened, and for just an instant, her professional mask cracked. The careful blankness of her expression gave way to something raw, recognition, perhaps, or the ghost of an old grief awakened. I'm sorry, Rebecca whispered in Korean, gently freeing her hair from the child's grasp. I'll be out of your way in just a moment. But So-yeon followed her as she stood, still staring with that unnerving focus that had worried doctors and psychiatrists for years. The child's lips parted slightly, as if she might speak, but no sound emerged. It never did. Jang stood slowly. At 6 feet tall and built like the boxer he'd once been, his presence commanded the room without effort. Take her back to the suite, he told the nanny, who'd been hovering anxiously near the door. The nanny approached, bowed to Rebecca in apology, and reached for So-yeon's hand. The child pulled away. She gripped the edge of Rebecca's apron instead. Every weapon in the room was suddenly visible. Not drawn, but ready. The temperature of the space changed, the air growing dense with the promise of violence should the stranger pose any threat to Jang's only child. Rebecca raised her hands slowly, showing them empty. It's okay, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that must have been coursing through her. She crouched to So-yeon's eye level, careful to make no sudden movements. Your papa needs you to go with your nanny now. Can you do that for me? So-yeon's grip tightened on the apron. Rebecca glanced at Jang, silently asking permission. He gave the smallest nod. She turned back to the child and began to hum again, that same quiet melody. She reached out and gently straightened So-yeon's collar, then brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. The gesture was so naturally maternal, so unconsciously tender, that even Jang felt something shift in his chest. So-yeon's hand loosened on the apron. There you go, Rebecca said softly. You're very brave. Your papa is very proud of you. The child looked back at her father, then at Rebecca again, then finally allowed the nanny to take her hand. But she watched Rebecca over her shoulder all the way to the door, and even after the door closed behind them, Jang could swear he felt his daughter's presence still there, refusing to leave. He turned his attention to the waitress. Rebecca had straightened, had returned to that careful professional neutrality, but he could see the tremor in her hands as she gathered the cloth full of broken glass. "What's your full name?" he asked. "Rebecca Cole, sir." Her Korean was fluent but accented, each word carefully pronounced. "I apologize for the disturbance. I should have been more careful with the placement of—" "How long have you worked here?" "3 months, sir." "And before that?" The pause. The kind of pause that meant there was a story, and probably not one she wanted to tell. "I worked at several establishments, sir. I can provide references if—" "That won't be necessary." He studied her face, looking for deception, for calculation, for any sign that this was something other than what it appeared to be. He found only exhaustion, weariness, and something else buried deeper. Sorrow, perhaps. The kind that never quite healed. He nodded once, dismissing her. Rebecca bowed and left quickly, the door closing with a soft click behind her. One of Jang's associates, a man named Park who controlled the Incheon ports, cleared his throat. "Should we be concerned?" "No," Jang said, but the word felt like a lie even as he spoke it. He couldn't explain the look in his daughter's eyes. Couldn't explain why So-yeon had reached out to a stranger when she barely tolerated the touch of her own family. Continue with the report on the prosecutor. But his mind was elsewhere for the rest of the meeting, replaying the moment his daughter had touched that woman's hair. Replaying the melody she'd hummed. Replaying the way So-yeon had gripped that apron like it was the only solid thing in a world made of water. 3 days later, Rebecca Cole was cleaning tables in the main dining room when the hostess approached with a strange expression on her face. "You've been requested for a private service," she said. "VIP room 7. Rebecca's heart sank. Private services could mean anything in a place like Jumseong. Tips were usually generous, but the work could be degrading, the requests sometimes crossing lines she wasn't willing to cross. She'd left establishments before when those lines got too blurred. "Can someone else take it? I'm scheduled for the main room all night. The request was specifically for you. By name." The hostess lowered her voice. "It's Chairman Jang." The cloth in Rebecca's hand dropped to the table. "I didn't do anything," she said immediately. "Whatever he thinks I did, I didn't. You're not in trouble. Just go. And Rebecca." The hostess's expression softened slightly. "Be careful." The walk to VIP room 7 felt like walking toward an execution. Rebecca had grown up in Chicago, had worked in Seoul for 3 years, and had learned enough about the city's power structure to know that Chairman Jang was not someone whose attention you wanted. Men like him existed in a different reality, where laws bent and disappeared, where a word could end a life as easily as snapping fingers. She knocked, waited for the response, and entered. The room was smaller than the one where she'd first encountered So-yeon. More intimate. A single table, already set with food that would feed 1 adult and 1 child. And there, in a chair too large for her, sat So-yeon herself. The girl's face lit up the moment Rebecca entered. Jang stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, silhouetted against the Seoul skyline. "Miss Cole," he said without turning. "Thank you for coming." "I wasn't aware I had a choice, sir." He turned then, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "You always have a choice. You can leave right now if you wish. But my daughter has refused to eat for 3 days. The doctors say there's nothing physically wrong with her. She simply refuses. Until this morning when I asked her what she wanted, and she pointed to your picture in the employee directory." Rebecca looked at So-yeon. The child was watching her with those intense dark eyes, holding a spoon but making no move to use it. "Sir, I'm not qualified to. I'm not asking you to cure her. I'm asking you to sit with her while she eats." He gestured to the chair across from So-yeon. "Please." It wasn't really a request. Rebecca set down her serving tray and moved to the indicated chair. She sat slowly, maintaining eye contact with So-yeon, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. "Hello again," she said gently. "I heard you wanted some company for dinner." So-yeon picked up her spoon, dipped it into the soup, brought it to her mouth and swallowed, then did it again. Rebecca felt Jang's presence behind her like a physical weight. She kept her voice light, conversational, as if this were the most normal situation in the world. "That looks good. Is it your favorite?" "My favorite is probably." She trailed off, searching for something neutral, something that couldn't be misconstrued. "Probably the seafood stew my grandmother used to make." She'd spend all day on it, and then we'd eat it together while she told me stories. So-yeon ate another spoonful, eyes never leaving Rebecca's face. She told me stories about Africa, about the places our family came from. I've never been there, but sometimes when she talked, I could almost see it. The colors, the sounds. She made it feel close, even though it was so far away. Rebecca was rambling now, filling the silence because silence in rooms like this felt dangerous. Do you like stories? So-yeon nodded. The first clear communication Rebecca had seen from her. Maybe I could tell you one sometime. If your papa says it's okay. It's okay, Jang said from behind her. His voice had softened slightly, the edge of command giving way to something that sounded almost like hope. Tell her one now. So Rebecca did. She told a story her grandmother had told her about Anansi the spider, about cleverness and courage and the way the small could triumph over the large through wit and determination. She kept her voice low and soothing, and she watched as So-yeon ate her entire meal without pause, spoonful after spoonful, as if the story itself was nourishment. When the bowl was empty and the story concluded, So-yeon set down her spoon and smiled. It was a small smile, tentative, but it was there. Real and present and heartbreaking in its rarity. Jang's hand touched Rebecca's shoulder briefly. Thank you, he said, and she heard the weight of what those words cost him. That became the new routine. Every evening for a week, Rebecca was pulled from her regular duties to sit with So-yeon while the child ate. She told stories. She hummed the melody that had first caught So-yeon's attention, though she didn't know why that particular song resonated. She learned that So-yeon liked to draw, that she was left-handed, that she had nightmares about water and fire. She learned nothing about why the child didn't speak. On the 8th evening, Jang stayed in the room during the meal instead of hovering outside. He sat at the far end of the table, pretending to review documents on his phone but clearly listening to every word Rebecca spoke. Tell me about yourself, he said abruptly, interrupting a story about a lion and a mouse. Rebecca's hands stilled. Sir, you've been in Seoul for 3 years. Before that, you worked in Dubai for 18 months. Before that, various locations in Europe. You move frequently. Why? The question was casual, but the attention behind it was not. Rebecca chose her words carefully. I like to see different places. Experience different cultures. You're running from something. I'm moving toward something. There's a difference. And what is that something? She looked at So-yeon, who was watching the exchange with clear interest. Peace maybe. Or at least the absence of pain. Isn't that what we're all looking for? Jang set down his phone. I had you investigated. Thoroughly. Do you know what I found? Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. I'm sure you'll tell me. Almost nothing. Your records are clean. Too clean. The kind of clean that costs money to achieve. Someone scrubbed your past. He leaned forward. Oh. And why? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Miss Cole. I respect you too much for that, and my daughter seems to care about you, which means I need to know exactly who you are. So-yeon reached across the table and put her small hand over Rebecca's. The gesture was protective, astonishingly so, as if the child were trying to shield the woman from her father's interrogation. Rebecca's eyes burned. She blinked hard, swallowing against the tightness in her throat. I used to work as a nanny, she said finally, in Dubai. For a wealthy family. Diplomatic family. There was an incident, an attack on the compound. Several people died. I survived. The child I was caring for survived. The parents wanted to avoid publicity, wanted to protect their daughter's identity, so they paid to relocate me and seal the records. That's all. That's not all. Jang's gaze was relentless. What aren't you telling me? That's all that matters. They stared at each other across the table, neither willing to break first. So-yeon squeezed Rebecca's hand, and that small gesture of trust decided the matter. Jang nodded once and returned to his phone, though the tension in his shoulders suggested the conversation was far from over. But it was So-yeon who shattered the fragile peace they'd built. It happened 3 nights later. Rebecca had just finished a story about a girl who could speak to stars when So-yeon stood from her chair and walked around the table to where Rebecca sat. The child climbed into her lap with a certainty that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times before, in some other life, some other context. Rebecca's arms came up instinctively to support her. So-yeon curled against her chest, fitting there perfectly, and buried her face in the curve of Rebecca's neck. And then, so quietly that Rebecca almost missed it, the child began to hum. The same melody. The lullaby Rebecca had hummed that first night. But So-Yun knew words that Rebecca had never sung aloud. Words in Swahili, the language of Rebecca's grandmother, the language of a childhood spent between Chicago and brief summer visits to relatives in Tanzania. Rebecca's breath stopped. Her hands trembled against So-Yun's small back. She looked up at Jang, who had gone completely still, his face drained of color. "How does she know that song?" Rebecca whispered. "How do you know that song?" Jang countered, standing slowly. "Where did you learn it?" "My grandmother taught me. It's the only thing I remember from before." She cut herself off, but the damage was done. "Where did So-Yun learn it?" "She used to hum it. Before she stopped speaking. Before her mother died." Jang crossed the room in 3 long strides, and suddenly he was looming over both of them, his face a mask of controlled rage and desperate confusion. "My wife sang that song. No one else. Just her. So tell me, Miss Cole, how is it possible that my daughter and a stranger from America know the same obscure lullaby?" Rebecca shook her head, but even as she did, pieces were falling into place. Impossible pieces. "The family in Dubai," she heard herself say. "The attack. There was so much chaos, so much fire. I grabbed the child I was caring for and ran. We got separated in the smoke. I searched for hours. By the time I found the compound again, everyone said she'd been recovered, that she was safe with her parents. They sent me away immediately. I never saw her again." "Describe her." "She was 3 years old. Dark hair. Dark eyes. She had a birthmark on her left shoulder blade, shaped like a half moon." Jang reached down and gently lifted the back of So-Yun's shirt. There, on her left shoulder blade, was a crescent-shaped birthmark. The room tilted. Rebecca clutched So-Yun tighter, and the child burrowed deeper into her embrace, making a sound that might have been contentment. "That's not possible," Rebecca breathed. "The family was Korean. They told me their daughter had been found. They showed me pictures of her being lifted into an ambulance. I saw." "You saw what they needed you to see." Jang's voice was hard, each word bitten off with precision. "My wife fled from me 3 years ago. She took So-Yun and disappeared. I searched everywhere. When I finally tracked them to Dubai, it was too late. There'd been an attack. Rival syndicate, targeting the family she'd sought protection from. My wife was killed. So-Yun was recovered, but she was different. Silent. Traumatized. And the only thing that calmed her was that damn song. I don't understand." "Neither do I. But my daughter knows you. Remembers you. And if you're telling me the truth, if you were there that night, then you saved her life." He pulled a chair close and sat, putting himself at eye level with both of them. "Tell me everything. Every detail. I need to understand what happened to my child." So Rebecca told him. She described the panic, the smoke, the way she'd wrapped the little girl in a wet blanket and carried her through flames. The way she'd sung that lullaby over and over to keep the child calm, to keep herself calm. The hours hiding in a storage room while men with guns searched the compound. The moment of separation when she'd set the girl down to break through a locked door and turned back to find her gone. "I thought they'd found her," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face now unchecked. "They told me she was safe. They paid me off and put me on a plane within 24 hours. I tried to follow up, tried to make sure, but the family wouldn't return my calls. Eventually I stopped trying. I told myself she was fine. That I'd done my job." "You did," Jang said quietly. "You saved her. But the trauma of that night, of losing you and her mother in the same event, it broke something in her. She hasn't spoken since." So-Yun lifted her head from Rebecca's shoulder. She looked at her father, then at Rebecca, and her lips moved soundlessly, forming a word she couldn't quite release. Rebecca touched the child's cheek gently. "It's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything. I'm here." But So-Yun was determined. Her small face scrunched with effort, her whole body tensing with the attempt to push sound through years of silence. And then, in a voice rusty from disuse but clear enough to shatter both adults completely, she spoke. "Mama." The word hung in the air like a prayer. Like an accusation. Like a miracle. Jang made a sound. Something between a gasp and a sob that he quickly stifled. His hands gripped the edge of his chair hard enough to make the wood creak. So-Yun turned in Rebecca's lap to face her fully. She cupped Rebecca's face in both small hands, the way a child might hold something precious and fragile. "Mama," she said again, stronger this time. "You came back." "Oh, sweetheart," Rebecca breathed, and then she was crying too hard to speak. She pulled So-Yun close and rocked her, and the child clung to her with a fierceness that spoke of abandonment and terror and the wild, desperate hope of the very young. Jang stood abruptly and walked to the window. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was Rebecca's quiet weeping and So-Yun's soft repetition of that single word. When Jang finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "She needs you. I know. I need you to stay. In Seoul. I'll arrange better housing, a salary that reflects this new arrangement. You'll be her caregiver. Officially." Rebecca looked down at So-Yun, who had fallen asleep against her chest, exhausted by the effort of speaking. "I'm not her mother. No. But you're the only person she remembers as such. And right now, that's more important than biology." He turned to face her, and she was shocked to see wetness on his cheeks. He didn't bother to wipe it away. "I'm not asking you to replace her mother. I'm asking you to help my daughter heal. Can you do that?" "I don't know. Will you try?" Rebecca studied his face, looking for manipulation, for the trap she was certain must be there. She found only a father's raw desperation. "What happens when she doesn't need me anymore? Then you can leave, if that's what you choose. But until then..." He paused, and when he continued, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "Until then, you'll have my protection. My resources. My gratitude. Anything you need." "I need you to understand something," Rebecca said carefully. "I can't be bought. I won't be controlled. If I stay, it's for her, not for money or safety or anything else you might offer. Understood? And if I think, at any point, that this situation is harmful to her, I will leave. I don't care how dangerous that might be for me." A muscle worked in Jang's jaw. "Also understood. Then yes, I'll stay. For her." So-Yun stirred in her sleep, murmuring something that sounded like "Mama" again, and both adults fell silent, unwilling to disturb the peace that had finally, impossibly, settled over the child. Over the following weeks, Rebecca moved into the Jang family compound. Her new quarters were larger than any apartment she'd ever rented, 3 rooms overlooking a private garden, decorated with expensive restraint. She had an assistant, a driver, and a security detail that followed at a discreet distance whenever she left the property. She also had a 6-year-old shadow who refused to let her out of sight. So-Yun spoke more each day. Short sentences at first, simple observations, but gradually expanding to stories about dreams and questions about the world. She asked about Africa, about America, about the places Rebecca had traveled. She asked if Rebecca had been scared during the fire, if she'd thought about her after they were separated, if she was going to leave again. That last question came often, usually at bedtime, delivered with a tremor that broke Rebecca's heart every single time. "I'm not leaving," Rebecca would answer, stroking the child's hair until she slept. "I promise." But promises felt dangerous in the world Jang inhabited. Rebecca saw the edges of his business, the men who came and went at odd hours, the conversations that stopped when she entered a room, the tension that sometimes permeated the compound like an electrical charge before a storm. She understood that she was now part of something that could turn lethal without warning. Jang himself remained distant but present. He joined them for dinner most evenings, sitting quietly while So-Yun chattered to Rebecca about her day. He watched his daughter with a hunger that was almost painful to witness, as if he were trying to memorize every expression, every laugh, against some future loss. He and Rebecca rarely spoke directly. Their communication was filtered through So-Yun, negotiated in the spaces between her needs and their shared determination to protect her. Until the night everything changed. Rebecca was reading to So-Yun in the library, a room lined floor to ceiling with books in multiple languages, when Jang appeared in the doorway. His face was drawn, his usual careful composure fractured. "I need to speak with you," he said to Rebecca. "Privately." Something in his tone made her stomach clench. She looked at So-Yun, who had already sensed the shift in atmosphere and was watching her father with wide, worried eyes. Let me get her to bed first. Now, Zheng said. Please. It's urgent. Rebecca called for So-Yun's regular nanny, who appeared within seconds and gently ushered the protesting child from the room. Once the door closed behind them, Zhang crossed to the bar and poured himself a drink. He downed it in one swallow, then poured another. What happened? Rebecca asked. There's been a threat. Against So-Yun. Against you. He set down the glass with enough force that amber liquid sloshed over the rim. One of my rivals learned about your importance to my daughter. They see you as leverage. A way to hurt me. Ice flooded Rebecca's veins. Should I leave? And go where? You think you'd be safer outside this compound? At least here, I can protect you. Out there, you'd be a target with no defense. He turned to face her fully. This is my fault. I should have anticipated this. Should have been more careful about who knew of your role in So-Yun's life. What are you going to do? What I always do. Eliminate the threat. His expression was cold now, the tenderness she sometimes glimpsed buried beneath the ruthless pragmatism that had made him one of Seoul's most feared men. But it will take time. Days, possibly weeks. Until then, you and So-Yun need to stay close to the compound. No outside trips. No exceptions. She'll hate that. She just started wanting to explore. She'll be alive, Zheng cut in. That's what matters. They stared at each other across the library, and Rebecca felt the weight of the choice she'd made settling more heavily on her shoulders. She'd known, abstractly, that Zhang's world was dangerous. But knowing and experiencing were vastly different things. I'm sorry, Zheng said, and he sounded like he meant it. I would spare you this if I could. Spare both of you. Why don't you? Rebecca asked suddenly. Why don't you leave this life? Take So-Yun somewhere safe. Start over. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think it's that simple? That I can just walk away from the empire I've built? The people who depend on me? The enemies who would hunt me to the ends of the earth if they thought I'd gone soft? He shook his head. This is who I am, Miss Cole. This is all I've ever been. You're also a father. Yes. And that's the only thing that still keeps me human. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. So-Yun asked me tonight if you were her new mama. She wanted to know if that meant you'd stay forever. Rebecca's throat tightened. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. That you care about her very much, and that you're family now, and that family is the most important thing we have. He looked back at her, and his eyes were haunted. Please don't make me a liar. Then he was gone, leaving Rebecca alone with her thoughts and the certainty that she'd crossed a line from which there was no return. The next morning, So-Yun woke up with a fever. By afternoon, it had spiked high enough that the compound's doctor was summoned. He examined the child thoroughly, ran tests, and finally declared it a severe flu that would require rest and monitoring. Rebecca didn't leave So-Yun's bedside. She kept cold compresses on the child's forehead, coaxed her to drink water and broth, and told stories in a low, soothing voice even when So-Yun was too feverish to follow the plot. Zhang appeared periodically, bringing food Rebecca barely touched and offering to spell her so she could rest. She refused every time. On the third night, when So-Yun's fever finally broke, the child woke in the dark hours before dawn and reached for Rebecca's hand. Mama, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Are you really staying? Rebecca smoothed the damp hair from So-Yun's forehead. Really, truly. Even though it's scary here sometimes? Even though. My other mama left, So-Yun said, and it was the first time she'd mentioned her biological mother since that initial breakthrough. She didn't mean to, but she left. And I was so scared. There was fire and loud noises and I couldn't breathe. I know, baby. I know. But you were there. You sang to me. You made it okay. So-Yun's grip tightened on Rebecca's fingers. Then you left too, and I thought I'd imagined you. I thought you were pretending. Papa kept saying my mama was gone and I was confused because you felt so real. Rebecca pulled the child into her arms, and So-Yun clung to her with a desperation that suggested the fever had brought all those buried fears to the surface. I'm so sorry, Rebecca whispered. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. But I'm here now. And I promise I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. Will you sing the song? The one from before. So Rebecca sang the lullaby in Swahili, the words her grandmother had taught her, the melody that had somehow traveled across continents and connected her to this child. So-Yun relaxed gradually, her breathing evening out as sleep reclaimed her. When Rebecca looked up, Jang was standing in the doorway. She didn't know how long he'd been there, but his expression suggested he'd heard everything. He didn't speak. Just nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement and perhaps gratitude, and disappeared back into the hallway. A week later, the threat was neutralized. Rebecca didn't ask for details, didn't want to know what neutralized meant in Jang's world. She simply accepted the news and allowed So-Yun to venture outside the compound again for the first time in days. They went to a park, public but monitored, surrounded by an invisible perimeter of Jang's security personnel. So-Yun ran ahead to the swings, her laughter carrying back on the spring breeze, and Rebecca followed at a slower pace, savoring the normalcy of the moment. Jang had insisted on accompanying them. He sat on a bench at a distance, watching his daughter play with an expression that held equal parts joy and sorrow. When Rebecca joined him, he spoke without looking away from So-Yun. She was 3 months old when I first held her. I remember thinking she was so impossibly small. I had handled weapons, managed violence, and commanded men who would kill on my word. But holding her terrified me. I was certain I'd break her somehow. You didn't, Rebecca said softly. No. But I failed her in other ways. I failed her mother. I was so consumed with building my empire that I didn't notice my wife was drowning. Didn't see how trapped she felt. By the time I understood, it was too late. She'd taken So-Yun and run, and I'd lost them both. He finally turned to look at Rebecca. I can't lose her again. I won't. Then maybe it's time to consider leaving, Rebecca said carefully. Not because you're weak. Because you're strong enough to choose your daughter over everything else. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand that So-Yun deserves a childhood that isn't defined by fear. I understand that you have the resources to disappear, to create a new identity, a new life. I understand that every day you stay in this world is a day you risk her future. She paused, gathering courage. I also understand that I can't stay here indefinitely. This isn't my world. I don't belong in it. Eventually, So-Yun will need to learn that I'm not her mother, that I can't replace what she lost. And when that time comes, she needs to have you. Fully. Completely. Not the version of you that's divided between love and business. Jang was quiet for a long moment, watching So-Yun climb to the top of the jungle gym and wave at them triumphantly. If I left, he said finally, if I took her away from everything I've built, would you come with us? The question caught Rebecca off guard. What? Would you come? Help me figure out how to be a father outside of all this? Help So-Yun transition to a normal life. He looked at her directly now. I'm not asking you to be her mother. I'm asking you to be family. Because that's what you are now, whether we planned it or not. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Jang's voice was steady, stripped of the usual calculation. I've spent 3 years trying to force my daughter back to who she was. But you showed me in a matter of weeks that maybe the answer isn't going backward. Maybe it's moving forward. Together. So-Yun had made a friend at the swings, another little girl about her age. Rebecca watched them take turns pushing each other, their laughter mingling with the sounds of the park. Normal. Innocent. Everything a childhood should be. I need time to think, Rebecca said finally. Take all the time you need. But understand something, Miss Cole. Whether you come with us or not, I'm doing this. I'm getting my daughter out of this life while she still has a chance at normalcy. You gave that to me. You showed me what matters. He stood, adjusting his jacket. I'll understand if you choose to walk away. But know that you'll always have a place with us. Always. That night, after So-Yun was asleep, Rebecca stood in her room and looked out at the Seoul skyline. Lights glittered like stars brought down to earth, and somewhere out there was the restaurant where this had all begun. Where a silent child had reached out to a stranger and changed everything. She thought about her grandmother, who taught her that family wasn't always about blood. Thought about the little girl in Dubai who she'd carried through fire, who'd somehow found her way back. Thought about Jang, who was trying so desperately to be a different kind of man for his daughter's sake. She thought about the life she'd been running toward, peace, security, the absence of pain. And she realized that maybe she'd been looking in the wrong places. Maybe peace wasn't a destination but a choice. Maybe security wasn't walls and distance but trust and connection. Maybe the absence of pain was impossible, but the presence of love could make pain bearable. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, behind the compound. East wall. Come alone. Rebecca's blood ran cold. She should alert security. Should wake Zhang. Should do anything except what the message demanded. Instead, she found herself pulling on dark clothes and slipping out of her quarters. The compound was quiet, the security detail changing shifts. She knew their rotation now, knew the gaps in coverage that lasted exactly 4 minutes every 3 hours. Knew that if someone wanted to breach the compound, this would be the time. The east wall was shadowed by a massive oak tree. Rebecca approached cautiously, every nerve screaming danger. She was about to turn back when a figure stepped from the darkness. A woman. Korean. Late 30s, dressed in expensive but understated clothing. She had So-Yun's eyes. "You're Rebecca Cole," the woman said in English. Not a question. Rebecca's mouth went dry. "Who are you?" "I'm Hae-jin, So-Yun's mother." The woman smiled bitterly. "Or I was before I became a ghost. Before my own husband declared me dead and convinced my daughter I'd abandoned her." The world tilted. Rebecca grabbed the wall for support. "That's impossible," Zhang said. Zhang said what was convenient. What allowed him to maintain control. Hae-jin stepped closer, and Rebecca could see the resemblance now, the shape of her face, the way she held herself. "I didn't die in Dubai. I survived. But barely. And when I tried to contact my daughter to take her back, I found that my husband had erased me completely. Told everyone I was dead. Kept So-Yun so isolated that she couldn't tell anyone the truth even if she wanted to. She couldn't tell anyone because she stopped speaking. Because he traumatized her. Because he ripped her from the only parent who'd ever put her first and told her I was gone forever." Hae-jin's voice cracked. "I've been trying to get close to her for months. But he has her locked down tighter than a fortress. Until you showed up. Until she bonded with you. And suddenly there were vulnerabilities I could exploit." Understanding crashed over Rebecca like ice water. The threat. The rival syndicate. That was you. I needed Zhang to be distracted. I needed you and So-Yun isolated enough that I could reach out. Hae-jin pulled out her phone and showed Rebecca a photo, So-Yun as a baby, cradled in her arms, both of them laughing. "She's my daughter. And I want her back." Rebecca's mind raced. Everything Zhang had told her, everything she'd believed about So-Yun's past, was crumbling. If you're really her mother, why not just go to the authorities? Take him to court. You think the authorities can touch Chairman Zhang? You think any court in Seoul would rule against him? Hae-jin laughed harshly. "He owns half the city, Rebecca. Judges, prosecutors, police. I tried the legal route. I was told in no uncertain terms that pursuing my daughter through official channels would be inadvisable. So you're asking me to help you kidnap her? I'm asking you to help me save her. From him. From that life. From the violence that follows him everywhere." Hae-jin's expression softened. "I know you care about her. I've watched you with her. You're good to her. But she's not yours, Rebecca. She's mine. And every day she spends thinking I'm dead is another day her heart breaks a little more. She's healing. She's speaking again. She's happy. She's calling another woman mama while her real mother is standing in shadows, aching for her." Hae-jin's eyes filled with tears. "Please. I'm begging you. Just bring her to me. 1 hour. Let me hold her, let me prove I'm alive. Then you can decide what to do. But at least give her the chance to know I didn't leave her. That I've been fighting to get back to her every single day since Dubai." Rebecca wanted to refuse. Wanted to run back inside and wake Zhang and let him handle this. But doubt had taken root. What if Hae-jin was telling the truth? What if Zhang had manipulated everything? What if So-Yun's real mother had been alive all this time, desperate and isolated, while her daughter mourned her? "How do I know you're really her mother?" Rebecca asked. Hae-jin reached into her pocket and pulled out a small cloth. She unfolded it to reveal a lock of dark baby hair tied with a pink ribbon. From her first haircut. I sang to her afterward. A lullaby in Swahili that my mother taught me, that I taught to the woman caring for her in Dubai. I made her promise to sing it if So-Yun was ever scared. The ground disappeared beneath Rebecca's feet. You taught me that song. I taught it to everyone who cared for my daughter. Because I knew I might not always be there. Knew that Zhang's world might catch up with us. I wanted her to have something consistent, something that would comfort her no matter who was singing it. Heijin's voice broke. I never imagined she'd end up singing it for you. Rebecca's hands trembled. I need proof. Real proof. Not just a lock of hair and a story. Come with me. I have documents. Photos. Medical records from my treatment after Dubai. Evidence that I'm alive and that Zhang has been systematically blocking my access to my own child. Heijin extended her hand. 1 hour. That's all I'm asking. Then you can make an informed decision about what's best for So-Yun. It was a trap. Every instinct Rebecca possessed screamed that this was a trap. But what if it wasn't? What if So-Yun's real mother was standing here, desperate and honest, while Rebecca protected the man who'd stolen her daughter? Where? Rebecca asked. A hotel. 10 minutes from here. I have a car waiting 2 blocks away. Heijin lowered her hand when Rebecca didn't take it. I understand your hesitation. But please understand mine too. I've lost 3 years with my daughter. 3 years of bedtimes and birthdays and first words. Don't make me lose another day. Rebecca looked back at the compound, at the window where So-Yun slept peacefully, trusting that the adults in her life would protect her. Then she looked at Heijin, at the raw pain in her expression that felt too genuine to be faked. 30 minutes, Rebecca said. Show me your proof. Then I'll decide what So-Yun needs to know. They walked in silence through the darkened streets. The car Heijin had mentioned was a modest sedan, not the luxury vehicle Rebecca had expected. They drove to a small hotel in a middle-class neighborhood, nothing like the exclusive establishments Zhang frequented. The room was sparse but clean. On the desk was a laptop surrounded by manila folders. Heijin opened the first one and spread its contents across the bed. Photographs of So-Yun from infancy through age 3. So-Yun is learning to walk. So-Yun's first birthday. So-Yun asleep in Heijin's arms. The progression of a normal childhood, documented with a mother's devotion. After Dubai, I was in a hospital for 4 months, Heijin said, opening another folder. Severe burns, broken bones, internal injuries. By the time I was well enough to search for So-Yun, Zhang had already reclaimed her. I tried everything. Private investigators. Lawyers. I even tried to approach the compound directly. She showed Rebecca police reports from incidents where she'd been arrested for trespassing near Zhang properties. Court documents where she'd petitioned for custody and been denied. Medical records confirming her injuries and treatment timeline. Letters she'd written to So-Yun that had been returned unopened. He's convinced everyone I'm unstable, Heijin continued. Convinced them that my grief made me delusional, that I'm imagining I'm So-Yun's mother when really I'm just a disturbed woman fixating on his daughter. Look. She pulled up a psychological evaluation on the laptop. Court-ordered assessment after my 3rd arrest. Diagnosed with delusional disorder. Recommended for involuntary psychiatric commitment. Rebecca scanned the document. It was thorough, professional, and utterly damning. But something about it felt wrong. The language was too perfect, the conclusions too convenient. This doctor works for a clinic Zhang funds. Every professional I've been evaluated by has connections to him. Every legal obstacle I've encountered traces back to his influence. Heijin sat heavily on the bed. I'm not delusional, Rebecca. I'm just powerless. And the only person who can give me back my power is you. By betraying Zhang. By putting So-Yun first. Which is what you've been doing all along, isn't it? So don't stop now. Don't let his money and power blind you to the truth. Rebecca picked up one of the photographs, So-Yun at age 2, laughing at the camera with pure, uninhibited joy. The kind of joy Rebecca had only recently seen her reclaim. If I help you, what happens? You take her and run? Zhang will never stop looking. He'll hunt you both until he finds you. Not if he believes we're dead. Heijin's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she retrieved another folder. I have papers. New identities for me and So-Yun. A place waiting in New Zealand, far enough from Zhang's reach that we can build a life. But I need to get her out of that compound first. And you're the only person who can do that without triggering every alarm. You want me to kidnap her. I want you to return her to her mother. Heijin moved closer, her intensity palpable. I know what you're thinking. Even if I'm telling the truth, this will traumatize So-yeon. That ripping her from another person she's bonded with will set her back. But children are resilient, Rebecca. And they deserve to know their truth. So-yeon deserves to know I didn't abandon her. That I've been fighting for her. Can you honestly tell me that living with that lie is better than a few months of adjustment? Rebecca couldn't. She'd seen what loss had done to So-yeon, how the child still woke up, sometimes calling for her mother. If Hae-jin was real, if this wasn't an elaborate deception, then maybe So-yeon did deserve to know. Maybe that knowledge would heal something no amount of stability could touch. I need to talk to Jang, Rebecca said. No. Hae-jin grabbed her arm. If you tell him, he'll move her. Hide her somewhere even you can't reach. Or worse, he'll convince you I'm lying, that all this evidence is manufactured. He's very good at making people believe what he needs them to believe. Then let me talk to So-yeon. Tell her you're alive. Let her choose. She's 6 years old. She can't make this choice. And Jang has spent 3 years programming her to fear me, to think I'm gone. She won't understand. Not until she's older. Hae-jin released Rebecca's arm and stepped back, composing herself. I'm asking you to trust me. The way you trusted that instinct that made you carry my daughter through fire. You knew then what she needed. You know now too. You just have to be brave enough to act on it. Rebecca's phone buzzed. A text from Jang. Where are you? Panic spiked through her. I have to go. He knows I'm gone. Then decide now. Are you with me or against me? Because if you go back there without committing, I'll have to disappear again. And next time, I might not be able to get this close. Next time, So-yeon might spend the rest of her childhood thinking she's an orphan. The phone buzzed again. Asterisk answer me. Security is searching the compound, asterisk. Rebecca looked at Hae-jin, at the evidence spread across the bed, at the desperate hope in a mother's eyes. Then she looked at her phone, at Jang's messages, and thought about the man who'd shown her vulnerability and trust. Who'd promised to leave his empire for his daughter's sake. She thought about So-yeon, caught between two adults who loved her, two truths that couldn't coexist. And she made her choice. I'm going back, Rebecca said. But I'm not going to lie to Jang. I'm going to tell him everything. And then we're going to find a way to do this right. Not in secret. Not through deception. So-yeon deserves better than that from all of us. Hae-jin's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Rebecca headed for the door, then paused. If you really are her mother, if you really love her, then you'll wait. You'll let me try to do this the right way. Give me 48 hours. And if Jang uses those 48 hours to make sure I can never reach her again, then I'll help you myself. I'll bring her to you. But first, I need to know that you're willing to put her well-being above your pain. Because that's what being a parent means. She left before Hae-jin could respond. The ride back to the compound was tense. Rebecca called Jang from the car, told him she was safe, and refused to explain where she'd been until she could do so face-to-face. By the time she arrived, he was waiting at the entrance with 8 armed men, his face a mask of cold fury. Inside, he said. Now. They went to his office, a room Rebecca had never entered before. It was austere, functional, decorated with weapons that were more art than utility. Jang dismissed his security and closed the door with a finality that made Rebecca's stomach clench. Where were you? His voice was deadly quiet. Meeting with someone who claims to be So-yeon's mother. Whatever Jang had expected, it wasn't that. His expression flickered. Shock, then calculation, then something that might have been fear. Hae-jin. She has evidence. Photos, documents, medical records. She says you've been blocking her access to So-yeon. That you faked her death. Rebecca kept her voice steady. Is it true? Jang turned away, moved to his desk, poured whiskey with shaking hands. It's more complicated than that. Then uncomplicated. Because right now, I don't know who to believe, and So-yeon deserves adults who will tell her the truth. The truth. Jang downed the whiskey. The truth is that Hae-jin was dying. She made me promise to keep So-yeon away from her, to let our daughter remember her as she was. Not as the shell the injuries had made her. I honored that promise. I told So-yeon her mother was gone. I made sure Hae-jin's attempts to contact us were blocked because I thought I was protecting my daughter from seeing her mother's deterioration. But she didn't die. No. She recovered. Far beyond what any doctor thought possible. And by then, Soyeon had stopped speaking, had buried her grief so deep that I thought bringing Haejin back would shatter her completely. He set down the glass. I made a choice. Maybe the wrong choice. But I made it out of love. You made it out of control, Rebecca corrected. You wanted to keep Soyeon to yourself. And maybe that's understandable. Maybe any parent would feel that way. But Haejin is alive. And Soyeon is calling me mama when her real mother is out there, desperate to hold her. Haejin is unstable. The trauma of what happened is no more than what you've put your daughter through by keeping them apart. Rebecca moved closer, forcing him to look at her. You have a choice now. You can keep fighting this, keep using your power to block Haejin, and keep lying to Soyeon. Or you can be the father she needs you to be. The one who puts her healing above his ego. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. I'm asking you to love your daughter more than you love owning her. The words hung between them like a blade. Jang's jaw worked, emotions warring across his features. Finally he spoke. If I allow Haejin back into Soyeon's life, she'll take her from me. She's wanted to leave since before Dubai. This will be her excuse. Then maybe it's time to let go. I can't. You have to. Rebecca's voice was gentle. Because the alternative is Soyeon growing up and learning you kept her from her mother. Learning that you lied about something so fundamental. That betrayal will destroy your relationship more surely than any custody arrangement. At least if you do this honorably, you have a chance at staying in her life. Jang sank into his chair, suddenly looking decades older. She'll hate me. She'll understand you. Eventually. If you give her the truth. Rebecca knelt beside his chair. I know you're scared, but you're also one of the strongest men I've ever met. Strong enough to do the hard thing. The right thing. For a long time, Jang didn't speak. Then, arrange a meeting. Monitored. I need to see Haejin with my own eyes, and I need to confirm she's stable enough to be around Soyeon. If she passes that test, we'll tell our daughter together. All three of us. Relief flooded through Rebecca. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This might destroy everything we've built. Or it might finally make it real. The meeting was arranged for 2 days later. Neutral territory, a therapist's office with a professional mediator present. Rebecca sat between Jang and an empty chair, waiting for Haejin to arrive. When she did, escorted by a social worker, the tension in the room became almost unbearable. Haejin looked different in daylight. Older. More fragile. But her eyes were clear, focused, and when she saw Jang, something complicated passed between them, love and hate and regret tangled into something unspeakable. Min-suk, she said softly. Haejin. Jang's voice was carefully neutral. You look well. I'm alive. That's more than you led our daughter to believe. The mediator intervened. Let's focus on why we're here. The well-being of your child. Both of you want what's best for her. Let's find a way to make that happen together. What followed was the most emotionally brutal 3 hours of Rebecca's life. Accusations and counter-accusations. Tears and rage and moments of heartbreaking vulnerability. Haejin described her recovery, the anguish of being kept from her daughter. Jang explained his reasoning, his fear, his desperate attempt to protect Soyeon from further trauma. Through it all, Rebecca watched and listened, trying to determine who was telling the truth. And slowly she realized they both were. They were both broken people who loved their daughter desperately and had made terrible choices from that love. By the end of the session, they'd reached an agreement. They would tell Soyeon together. Gradually reintroduce Haejin into her life. Work toward a custody arrangement that prioritized the child's stability above parental claims. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Thank you, Haejin said to Rebecca as they left. For making him listen. For being brave enough to tell him the truth. I didn't do it for you, Rebecca replied honestly. I did it for Soyeon. She deserves to know both her parents love her. And you? Where do you fit in all this? Rebecca had been asking herself that question for days. I don't know yet. I guess we'll figure it out as we go. That evening, the 3 adults sat with Soyeon in the compound's garden. The child sensed something momentous was coming. She clung to Rebecca's hand and watched her parents warily. Jang spoke first. Soyeon, there's something we need to tell you. Something important. So-Yun's grip tightened. Is Mama leaving? No, baby, Rebecca said quickly. I'm right here. Then what? Hae-jin moved closer, careful not to crowd the child. So-Yun, do you remember the fire? The night that was very scary? So-Yun nodded slowly, her eyes growing wide. You thought I died that night. Your papa thought I died too. But I didn't. I was hurt very badly, and it took me a long time to get better. But I'm here now. I'm alive. Hae-jin's voice cracked. I'm your your first mama. So-Yun stared at her. Then she looked at Jang, seeking confirmation. He nodded, his own eyes wet. But Papa said you were gone, So-Yun whispered. He said you were never coming back. I thought that was true, Jang said. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. So-Yun processed this with a child's logic, trying to fit this new reality into the framework she'd built. She looked at Rebecca. Then who are you? I'm the person who carried you through the fire, Rebecca said gently. I took care of you when you were scared. Your first mama taught me the song I sang to you. She wanted to make sure you'd always be safe, even if she couldn't be there. So you're not my mama? The question cut deeper than any blade. Rebecca forced herself to smile. I love you like a mama. I always will. But your real mama is here now. And she's been waiting so long to hold you. So-Yun looked between the three adults, her small face working through complex emotions. Then she did something none of them expected. She took Hae-jin's hand with one of hers and kept holding Rebecca's with the other. Can I have two mamas? She asked. Hae-jin began to cry. Rebecca joined her. Even Jang had to turn away to compose himself. Yes, Hae-jin managed. Yes, baby. You can have two mamas. So-Yun seemed satisfied with this arrangement. She leaned against Rebecca but kept studying Hae-jin with curious eyes. Do you know the song too? I taught it to her, Hae-jin said. Would you like me to sing it with you? So-Yun nodded. And there, in that garden, three women sang the lullaby together. A mother, a found family, and a child who was finally beginning to understand that love didn't have to be singular or simple. That healing could include all the broken pieces instead of choosing between them. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us create more meaningful content like this, and I'd love to hear how So-Yun's journey resonated with you. The transition wasn't easy. Over the following months, So-Yun struggled with her dual attachment. Some days she wanted only Rebecca. Other days she clung to Hae-jin with desperate intensity. There were regressions, nights where she couldn't sleep, days where the words disappeared again and silence returned. But there were also breakthroughs. The first time she called Hae-jin Amma, without prompting. The night she asked if her Amma and her Mama could both tuck her in. The afternoon she drew a picture of her family, four figures holding hands, each one labeled in careful Hangul. Jang kept his promise. He began the slow process of extracting himself from his criminal empire, using the same ruthless efficiency he'd once used to build it. He made deals, cut ties, relocated assets. It would take years to fully disentangle himself, but he was committed. For So-Yun. For the chance to be a father who wasn't defined by violence. Hae-jin moved into a separate residence on the compound, close enough for frequent visits but far enough to maintain boundaries. She and Jang were learning to be partners in parenting if not in marriage. It was uncomfortable, often painful, but they were trying. For So-Yun. And Rebecca. Rebecca was learning that sometimes home wasn't a place you found but a family you built. She stayed, not out of obligation or fear, but because this strange, fractured, healing family had become hers. She watched So-Yun learn to trust again, to speak freely, to laugh without fear. She watched Jang transform from a kingpin into a father. She watched Hae-jin reclaim pieces of herself she'd thought lost forever. 6 months after that first meeting, Jang made his final announcement. He was leaving Seoul, taking So-Yun somewhere safe, somewhere the shadows of his past couldn't reach. New Zealand, as Hae-jin had originally planned. Hae-jin would come too, as would Rebecca, if she chose. I know I have no right to ask, Jang said. They were in the garden again, So-Yun sleeping peacefully in her room above them. You've given us more than we deserved. If you want to stay in Seoul, build your own life, I'll understand. But So-Yun will want you there. And so will I. And me, Hae-jin added. She and Rebecca had developed a careful friendship, built on their shared love for So-yeon and mutual respect for each other's role. You're part of this family. Part of her story. I won't pretend that's always easy for me. But it's true. Rebecca looked up at So-yeon's window, at the soft glow of the nightlight she insisted on keeping lit. She thought about Chicago, about Dubai, about all the places she'd run to and from. Thought about her grandmother's stories, about finding home in unexpected places. I'll come, she said. But not as a nanny. Not as an employee. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it as family. You always have been, Jang said simply. The move happened in stages. First Jang, establishing their new life. Then Haejin and So-yeon, traveling under new identities, starting fresh. Finally Rebecca, carrying with her a single suitcase and a heart fuller than she'd ever imagined possible. Their new home was a sprawling property overlooking the ocean. So-yeon had her own room with windows that opened to the sea breeze. There was a garden where Haejin planted vegetables and flowers. There was a study where Jang worked on legitimate business ventures. There was a guest house where Rebecca lived, close enough to be present but far enough to maintain independence. And there was peace. Real peace. The kind that came from truth and hard work and people choosing each other every single day. So-yeon thrived. She attended a local school, made friends, learned to swim. She called Haejin Amma, and Rebecca Mama, and Jang Papa, and seemed to have infinite room in her heart for all of them. She still had nightmares sometimes, still remembered the fire and the fear. But now she had 3 adults to comfort her, 3 different versions of love to anchor her. On her 7th birthday, So-yeon asked for a party in the garden. She invited her new friends, decorated with streamers, and insisted that all 3 of her parents sit together for the cake cutting. As they sang to her, as she closed her eyes and made her wish, Rebecca caught Jang's gaze across the table. He mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." She shook her head. Because this wasn't something that required thanks. This was family. Messy, complicated, imperfect, and absolutely worth every difficult moment. After the party, after the guests had left and So-yeon was asleep with frosting still smudged on her cheek, the 3 adults sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. Haejin spoke first. I've been thinking about the fire. About how much we all lost that night and how much we gained. She glanced at Rebecca. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't carried her out, none of this would exist. This family. This peace. So-yeon would have died, or I would have died, and Min-suk would still be that man he was trying to leave behind. We all saved each other, Rebecca said. That's what family does. Is that what we are? Jang asked, but there was no doubt in his voice. Just wonder. Family? The realest kind, Rebecca confirmed. The kind you choose. Haejin reached out and took both their hands. Then let's promise something. No more secrets. No more lies to protect each other. We tell So-yeon the truth always. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Agreed, Jang said. Agreed, Rebecca echoed. They sat in silence after that, 3 people who'd been broken and remade, watching the ocean reflect starlight. Inside, So-yeon slept peacefully, surrounded by the love of 3 parents who'd learned that family wasn't about blood or law or convention. It was about showing up. About choosing each other. About making room for all the complicated truths that made a person whole. And somewhere in the distance, Rebecca could swear she heard her grandmother's voice, singing that lullaby one more time. A song that had traveled across continents and generations. A song that had brought them all home. Years later, when So-yeon was older and asked about how they'd all come together, Jang would tell her the truth. He'd explain his mistakes, his attempts at control, the way he tried to protect her by hiding reality. Haejin would describe her fight to survive, to return, to reclaim the daughter she'd lost. And Rebecca would talk about fire and fear and the moment a small hand had grabbed her apron and changed everything. And So-yeon would listen, taking it all in, and then she'd say what she'd known all along. You're all my family. All of you. And I'm lucky. She was. They all were. Because sometimes the most broken things, when pieced back together with love and honesty and determination, become stronger than anything built from scratch. Sometimes family isn't about perfection. It's about people who refuse to give up on each other. Who choose truth over comfort, connection over control. Sometimes a silent child speaks and calls someone mama, And that single word rewrites every life it touches. And sometimes that's not the ending. It's just the beginning. The real story, the one about healing and trust and learning to be whole, that story takes a lifetime to tell. But it's worth every moment, every hard conversation, every tear, every laugh, every imperfect, beautiful day of choosing each other again. That's family. That's love. That's home. If this story touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. And if you'd like to see more stories about family, redemption, and the power of human connection, please subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything and helps us continue creating content that matters. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to Soyeon's story. Until next time, may you find your own version of family. The chosen kind, the complicated kind, the kind that makes you whole.